Welcome, everyone, to the Top Employers APAC podcast, where we explore ideas and perspectives for a better world of work. I'm Livia, your host for today, and I'm very, very pleased to have with me Sanjeev Agarwal, who is the head of human resources for Swiss Re Southeast Asia. Sanjeev, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you for letting me in.
No, not at all. I think it's our privilege to have you. And I also hear you're getting a little bit famous. You've been on a couple of other podcasts and a couple of other shows.
Yeah, misadventures, if I can say.
Well, hopefully this will be another good misadventure.
Let's hope so.
So, Sanjeev, I think talking about the content for today, I realize also, I think we were very, very proud that you were, I think you've also related very well to the theme of our 2024 World of Work Trends Report, and that is recentering the human. Now, I'm very curious to hear your views on, I think when it comes to all the jargon around this, we talk about human-centric principles, we talk about putting our people first, but what to you does recentering the human mean? And why do you think it's important now?
Yeah, I think...
Sorry to start you off with in the deep end.
Okay, let's go for it then.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, right, recentering a human kind of is a very resonating phrase and how you frame the challenge today. And what I mean by that is all our efforts today should be focused on the individual rather than focusing on part A of that individual or the experience of that individual in a particular sense, the technicality of compensation frameworks, all sorts of different things that we get sometimes distracted by in isolation. For me, the biggest challenge today is bringing a cohesive experience for an individual. That is the key differentiator. And sometimes we are not as cohesive or as equally distributed across the board to create that experience for that individual.
Can you elaborate what do you mean by lacking cohesion?
So sometimes if you see, we tend to focus on some aspects of that individual's experience versus others. Let's take an example. We recently had a big event that impacted everybody's work-life experience in COVID, right?
Absolutely.
During COVID, everybody focused a lot on mental well-being as a practice. And everything else was almost second tier in a way, right? Because it was also relevant and it felt appropriate at the time, all of that stuff. And then some of those practices got carried through in the post-COVID era. Some of those practices got left out. You saw most organizations claiming that people working from home resulted in higher productivity at the time, right? But that's changing again as we come back into the old ways of our working. Now, in all of this, we are looking at isolated parts of that human experience rather than the human as a whole.
How does this show up at Swiss Re?
Well, I think Swiss Re has done a pretty good job in that sense. I'm very proud to be, at the experiencing end of it. I don't take credit for doing any of that, but definitely as an employee, I think I've experienced that. I also don't want to say that Swiss Re's got it all right at 100% perfect. But the work from home piece, for example, wasn't triggered by pandemic for us. We've had a policy for years before the pandemic. We call it Own the Way You Work, which meant you could work from a place of your choice at the time of your choice as long as you delivered on your deliverables.
How do you translate that across geographies? I also know there are a lot of organizations that kind of struggle with that true flexibility when it comes to taxation requirements in different countries and so on and so forth. So is that bound by region, or how do you...
There are complications around it, right? So this was introduced, I don't know, I think more than 8-9 years ago. And the it wasn't teleworking. So it's not about you can work from anywhere in the world. Right? That's a different proposition we have, where we have certain number of days you can work from a different location outside of your primary place of work,
right?
Subject to having those clearances of ability to work in those jurisdictions, etc. So that's kind of a bit of a different requirement. But from own the way you work policy perspective, the expectation was that we give flexibility to people to be able to manage their work and their personal life in a more independent manner than being forced to say, you come to work at 9 a.m. and you sit here, you may have work or you may not have work to do at the time, but you will only go home.
9 hours.
In fact, I got invited to a number of different conversations because people were very intrigued. This is pre-pandemic we're talking about, right? And to say, how do you implement this, on the way you work? Because a lot of interest in different sectors.
Exactly.
And one of the questions I kept getting asked, well, if you don't ask them to come to work, how do you know they are not on Facebook? And my response used to be, if they are at work, how do you know they are not on Facebook?
And it boils down to trust.
Yeah, and also a bit of confusion, right? Bringing people to work was getting used as a tool to manage performance, or as at least was being tried, that if people are at work, it's assumed that they will be working. So you are trying to capture a metric of people coming to work in the context of are they productive or not.
And I think having the ability to observe your employees then kind of becomes a measure of, like you said, are they working?
Well, is it a good measure or not is an interesting question to debate on.
I agree.
Yeah. Of course, after pandemic, we also realized that we cannot. So the flip side to this, right, is not that you can work from home permanently, right? And we never had that issue. Even though we had this policy, people would still come to work. If they would travel or if they want to go home early, they would do that and then log in again later in the evening. Whatever they do to finish whatever they're supposed to do, they will do it in their own ways in alignment with their line manager. After pandemic, we felt that we needed people to be back at office as well, because you have new people joining the organization. How do they build those relationships? How do they build those networks if there's nobody in the office? It's equally important to have spaces in the workplace to be able to collaborate, get to know each other, connect with each other, have a coffee, whatever. And for that, we've started to increasingly encourage people to come to office few days in a week.
And I hope that would allow them to make the most of this beautiful space that we're sitting in.
So that's part of the attraction. The proposition is that it's such a comfortable place that it's inviting for people to come. We still don't track attendance at an individual level.
You don't track attendance?
No.
No platform or dashboard tracking work from home versus work from office, attendance rate?
Not at a central level, no. So it's between the individual and their line manager where they're working from.
Fantastic.
We have a leave management system, of course, for administrative reasons.
Yeah.
But we don't track attendance as an attendance.
This is very interesting because, in our organization, we work with a large pool of top employers. And to date, we certify more than 2,300 organizations around the world. We like to think because they are certified, they're a little bit more forward-looking and, futuristic in their practices. But still, we only have 60% of our top employers who are really empowering their employees to manage, their work, manage their hours and location and things like that. So I think it's a very interesting approach you have. And I'm curious because you've also touched on how this will change post-pandemic and now we're really moving out of it. What do you think will happen in the next 2 years?
Maybe 5 years.
Okay, 5 years.
I think it's still evolving, this space, right? More and more people. So when I talk to people who we are talking to as potential employees, right? I get more often asked, what's your workplace policy than I was ever asked this question before pandemic. Right? So people are interested to know what...
People were not worried
Yeah.
about their workplace policies.
Yeah.
I like people to come into the office. That's how we operate.
Everybody had that expectation.
Yeah.
And there we have now set a new standard as a common benchmark that everybody is not on the same page anymore. So people are interested, and that's a decision point for them.
This makes me also think about, I know you have touched on this a little bit, but I was curious to come back to the connection part of things, because as we have now greatly enabled remote onboarding and remote work as an option, and hopefully I think we also see the increasing uptick of that option as well. I think just last year it was a collaboration between Meta and Gallup, where they surveyed over 1,000 individuals times 142 countries. And they found the loneliness epidemic. I don't know if you've heard of this one. I think it's nearly a quarter of working adults feel either very lonely or fairly lonely. And I wonder how we've contributed to that in a sense. And I wonder how, in an organization, is there a space for us to work through that? So do you think, there's space for creating that social connection in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think more than ever before. Right. And therefore, if you see a lot of social activities are taking place at workplace, you're seeing workplaces transforming to kind of expand into collaborative spaces. People can hang out together. There are more and more activities that workplaces are promoting. So this is all going towards an area of increasing connect between people because of the need that people are working more remotely now than before. And therefore, how do we bring an opportunity for them to connect more? And eventually, there is a balance between the two. As an individual, one would like to have the flexibility to be able to do their laundry and get on a call on days, but would also want to have the opportunity to be able to connect in the group that they work with, because that is also a parameter of being effective. You're connected, that's why you're more effective. Very few jobs in the world today can be done in complete isolation.
This makes me think of what we just spoke about this morning in this beautiful new office in Goko Midtown. And you were just saying that there are fewer seats, but more collaboration spaces here than in your old office at Asia Square.
Yeah. So we have more space, but we have more community space kind of pieces. So you can, there are sofas, you can just sit down, get a coffee, just connect with people. There are collaboration spaces, you can work together. So we don't really have one desk for every employee in the office anymore. But we have more space for people to work together, get together, discuss, debate, whatever they feel like, just hang out.
How do you think this will maybe slowly evolve culture at Swiss Re? Maybe how do you hope that it might evolve?
So I think the intent is for the cultural fabric to get strengthened with collaboration, with interdependence of individuals, right? Making them more effective and also more satisfied as individuals. That, if you think about it, engagement stems from working together. If you put everybody in a remote setting, it's unlikely that their engagement will go up because they're working all by themselves and they have all the flexibility. That's not necessarily the only factor bringing up engagement. People need human-to-human connection to feel valued, to feel a common identity, to feel connected. And this is exactly what will enable that feeling.
One of the things we did recently with engagement scores was to map that against well-being policies and practices. I don't know whether you have seen the well-being plateau. And this is kind of tying it back to what we were speaking about at the start around recentering the human. Because we also noticed, for better or for worse, it is an aggregate data that we can collect from a vast pool. And what that meant was when we mapped engagement scores on an axis and the number of well-being offerings that you bring to your employees on the other axis, we actually saw a plateau. And what that meant was it doesn't mean that the more offerings you have, whether you give them yoga, meditation, I don't know, free fruit or all sorts of things that you can offer your employees, that it didn't necessarily correlate with continued increase in your engagement score. And I think that comes back to what you've mentioned, where there are so many little components in that. Of course, on one hand, looking at the change over time, but what it did mean was, is it then worth maybe reevaluating what's on that plate? Is it necessary to have more offerings, or is it necessary, maybe a little bit more meaningful, to see what are my employees really using and what is of interest to them? Because it's a big investment, we all know.
I think sometimes we get distracted by, let's put this also on the plate and let's put that also on the plate. There's a new solution in the market. Let's get that.
Yeah.
Well, I feel the biggest kind of differentiator in that space is really understanding what people are really looking for in your organization, right? And if we start from that spectrum, there is going to be a set of key interventions that people are looking for that you can address as an organization. And then there is going to be those individualized specific scenarios that people are happy to take care of it themselves, as long as there is some flexibility in the framework that governs that piece, right? Yeah. So I'm a big believer that we should not just add interventions for the sake of interventions. And you're right, it doesn't linearly affect your engagement in that sense or efficacy at that. In fact, one of the things we tried in this space during pandemic, as you pointed out, right, everybody was jumping onto, let's do a meditation session, let's do the yoga session and make people, feel comfortable. That was, as an organization, I'm thinking this is what will help people. But it's not necessarily unique, because they have access to meditation if they want to. I mean, I'm sure lots and lots of organizations organize this. We did as well. But in my experience, you start with 100 people joining. The next session, it drops down to 70 people. 50 of those cameras are off. And someone on the program team is sitting there scratching their head wondering, what's going on? Correct. I thought I've given everyone what I thought they wanted. Exactly. Now, that's a big reveal, right? It is. This is not exactly what people wanted. So one of the things we experimented with, I think at the time it felt quite bold, is we started our radio show, a Swiss radio show. A radio show? Mm-hmm. So let me explain. If you think about what was happening during the initial phases of pandemic, everybody was getting used to a new way of working, which was, you're stuck at home, you may not have enough infrastructure at home to be able to effectively work. You cannot go out, and that's causing stress in itself, right? There is an uncertainty about how this pandemic is evolving, and there's concern, and there's family affected, individuals affected, all sorts of things that are adding on to people, stressing them out. And what they were looking for is an outlet to connect with people and feel distracted, maybe less stressed for some time. And we thought, okay, a yoga session also has its own stress levels in a way. If I'm trying to find myself a pose and I'm struggling to figure it out, I'm thinking, what does it do to me really? Okay, I'm sure yoga is great. I'm a big believer of that. But what we thought was, let's take it to a different paradigm. And we'll just have some music played, some talk about non-work related stuff, right? Non-work related. So we had topics like online shopping, what's working, what's hot, how do you get bargains? We talked about online dating, for example. We talked about, recipes. We spoke about, what food of which location is really famous, all sorts of things, nothing to do with work. It used to be just music, conversations, and that's it. Is it employees only? Because now I'm interested to see what it's like. Can I dial in too? I'll tell you later. We created it for employees, with employees. We had a radio jockey, and we started it in, I think, 2020 sometime. And we still run seasons of that radio show. You hired a professional radio jockey? Yeah. Because you needed some level of skill to do this. And believe me, it is a skill.
It is absolutely a skill. I have great respect for that skill.
It was interesting finding a radio jockey who got the concept because everybody's like, so you want me to talk about mission statement of your company to your employees? You want to talk about...
One would think,
Right?
because it's, yes.
I was like, no, I don't want to talk about any of that. So
do your usual.
yeah. So it was interesting, very interesting experience, but it became a big hit.
How was the employee response? Did you get any feedback on it?
Yeah. So the greatest testimony of that response is pandemic is long over and we still run the radio show. We don't run it every week, but we run it in seasons.
In seasons?
So we do a season of about 6 to 8 weeks every Friday, 1 hour, 45 minutes.
Wow, so it's fantastic. So it's run at downtime and everyone really just needs the opportunity to just disconnect and think about everything else but work.
Yeah. So we have a radio going on, we have music, we have people conversing. There's a chat format in there so audience can also engage. We run a quiz show on this. We do all sorts of things.
And it's completely inclusive to anyone who wants to work from home on a Friday or
Absolutely.
Anywhere else they want to be.
Yeah. So it's an interesting experience. And believe me, the kind of feedback we got was more about, this was the best stress buster I've had.
Where did this idea come from?
So if you think about...
I'm probably looking at the source, I'm guessing.
Well, there are, ideas are dime a dozen in life. Implementation is the key.
I agree.
So like you were talking about, you set up a meditation session, a yoga session, and you realize that this is not really effective in the way you thought it would be. Because also people were trying to adapt to a Zoom call or Teams call, and it wasn't something that was as evolved at the time. Connection wasn't that great. There was lag in it. Can you hear me? Can you not hear me? Something is freezing. All sorts of things that we experienced, right? So that got me thinking, what is it that I'm trying to really do here? I'm trying to get somebody to be effective on a spoken medium, because that's really what it is. We don't have the props. We don't have the space. We cannot bring people together to connect. We have to engage with them when they can hear us, because the video quality of those calls at the time wasn't always stable. If you were having multiple connections, people, 50 plus people joining, it used to have its own challenges. So then if you are looking for that kind of a skill, where do you go find that skill? Radio. And then you say, okay, if I need people to just feel, a window, they get a window of de-stressing themselves. Music de-stresses everybody, right? And just talk about something different. So why not? And that's how it started.
Now that I'm actually thinking about it, it's extremely low barriers to entry. It's very inclusive to anyone who may have had a bad week in terms of the mental health space at that point in time.
Correct.
It allows them to pivot into thinking about something completely different, a little bit lighthearted, a little bit funny maybe. So probably achieved maybe all of the objectives that maybe were the goal at that time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure not everybody was a fan of it, but sure. It did appeal to a lot of people.
Sure, not the music you played.
Well, I'm not a big music person, so we left it to the radio jockey to decide what they wanted. But we got a lot of requests. We still have people engaging with it consistently over the years, right? So it's a big hit in that sense. But the point I'm trying to make is there are opportunities to do this outside of the traditional ways of engaging with people on some of these topics.
Yeah. What are some of the other ways that you would gather feedback about what employees want? Because if you want to give choice, we want to give flexibility, I think it then boils down to how do you really do the employee listening in a meaningful way?
I think listening is just that, listening.
It's easy to say.
You just sit down with people and listen. There is no other way to do this better. Of course, you can use metrics with respect to, surveys, and we do pulse surveys and more evolved surveys. So we do quick surveys, which are like not very detailed and doesn't have 60 questions. We also do the detailed version of it. So all sorts of things we do. We do lots of different interventions across the board. But I think listening is part of your culture.
So it's not about how many channels do we have. It's not about, the platforms that we provide, but for you, it's more important that it's in the culture every single day. If I have something to say, someone in my team will listen to me. Maybe my manager will listen to me, or my mentor if I have one.
Yeah, and I think listening has the other aspect, safe space for speaking. Right? If you don't have safe space for speaking, no matter what you think you're listening, you're not listening because nobody's saying anything.
Talk to me about the psychological safety, because I agree with you. It's extremely important. Personal view, maybe not something we think about enough. How do you maybe try to create that space?
I think psychological safety is very complex to achieve, right? Because everybody experiences it in their own personal lens. But the broad framework in my experience is psychological safety emanates from the fact that if I say something, I'm safe. And I am not running a risk of saying something uncomfortable, saying something unpopular, and getting ostracized. Right? So do we have a culture of listening to dissenting voices of sorts? And I'm exaggerating by saying dissenting, but listening to different viewpoints and bringing them together. It could be in a meeting where, the boss is saying, approach A. Do we have a culture of somebody who's not as senior in the organization being able to say, what about approach B? And getting the same amount of airtime to position their approach B for consideration. It's as simple as that, but it's also as difficult as that to achieve.
This is something that is also very close to my heart, but I also hope that even today, coming into this conversation, I think we did our best to also share and create that space for yourself as well. And I think this is what I actually appreciate about our own team and the production team at Top Employers, where, we like having people like you to come and share your dissenting views. There's some things that are a little bit, off the cuff in the agile community, but thank you. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I think it's a big piece of challenge. Culture is really, I think, the core of performance and success. I am a firm believer that culture is more important than strategy.
In a few words, now I won't kind of put you into a box of how many words, but in a few words, how would you describe the Swiss Re culture?
Swiss Re culture, or any culture as you experience it, right? So this is more about what I experience of the culture, or what I think others with me experience it. A very, very collaborative culture, open culture. I have joined Swiss Re a few years ago. I still don't understand some of the things that we do in this company. And I've never had a situation where I walked up to somebody and said, look, this sounds basic, but I don't get it. And till date, I've never had a situation where somebody said, I'm busy. Let me know later. Or I really don't have time for it. Or even, not my job to explain it to you.
Not my job to explain it to you. I think that's a very interesting point. I'd like to come back to that.
Yeah. So that's something that is very deep rooted, right? We don't have a culture of, okay, this is what I want to do and that's what matters. We have a culture of, this is what I think I should do, but let's also hear from others. Let's understand what's view of people on the table, the key stakeholders, and let's get a way forward that makes sense from different perspectives. Because whatever decision I take, I cannot be the only perspective in that decision, right? So I think that's a big value for our culture, and I think that is something that is valued by a lot of our people and colleagues across, even clients in that sense, right? My wish list for our culture is we can be sometimes slower in making decisions.
Slower in making decisions, all right?
And it partly comes from collaborative effort that sometimes can go too far, right? Sometimes we can't wait for building consensus for too long, right? So I feel that's something that it's not just me. A lot of people in the organization feel that we can be faster sometimes, and that's interestingly that's something that we are now focusing on as an organization. So we've kind of done some culture activation programs around new behaviors and some of those things, and one of those is improving our speed of decision making.
To make decisions a little bit quicker and to maybe pilot a little bit faster. Is that what you're saying?
So the idea is that, we must be more efficient in that sense and make it work in the time that we have.
I saw a recent post on LinkedIn from you. I think that was a little bit about there is no time like the present, right? Maybe tomorrow it won't be relevant. Maybe tomorrow the coffee will be cold. Maybe tomorrow, all sorts of things. So does that sort of line up with that?
So I have to explain my LinkedIn post to you because sometimes there's a story behind my LinkedIn setup.
Right.
So I think last year sometime, I thought I need to do something different. And I thought, okay, let me go back to drawing. I used to draw when I was a kid and I have not done it for many, many years, right? Decades. And I thought, okay, do something different. Let me start drawing again. And I'm really bad at drawing. It's not like I'm a good drawing person. But so I started to draw on my iPad, got some software and did that. And I said, but if I'm drawing it on my iPad, I will stop drawing it after a few weeks because what am I doing? I'm just drawing it, keeping it in my iPad. After a few weeks, I'll lose the motivation to continue to do so. So to create some accountability for myself, I said, I will post at least one drawing on a social media platform. And the kind of person I have, my biggest social media network is on LinkedIn, not on Facebook, not on Insta, none of that stuff, right?
Busy working.
A bit different in that sense. So, okay, I'll post it on LinkedIn. And because you just can't, it's not Insta, right? So I can't really post a picture and just say nothing about it. So I thought, okay, I'll post a picture, say something about it, whatever thoughts I have. So it's nothing to do with Swiss Re or work, right? It's just my thoughts. So over a weekend, I will draw something, have some thoughts about it, post it on LinkedIn. That's how it started. That's still the case. It's just that I stopped drawing because Gen AI came up and I figured out I can put 2 sentences of my text and it comes up with much better pictures. So you see, this is an interesting example. What I started
the pros
with,
and cons of AI drawing for you.
There you go. So nowadays, I still post it. And I was surprised that these were just musings, if I can say, over a weekend. I'm thinking through some questions, something bothers me, something comes up. I pen it down, interesting thoughts, something for myself as well. And then I post a picture and that's about it. I wasn't expecting anything out of it, but it started to get popular and started to get mentioned in conversations with me. I've even got people reaching out to me, giving me ideas of what I should write on. And I'm like, okay, now this is creating pressure on me.
And now then you have to create a list of people's wish list or expectations, demands. What is Sanjeev going to draw?
So I'm trying to stay away from that. I'm just sticking to the basics. Whatever thoughts come over the weekend, I try to pen it down. If it makes sense, I post it. If it doesn't, I don't.
But I think they're very valuable, especially if they resonate with a wider audience. So absolutely, I think please keep doing that.
No,
I'm definitely following.
Thank you. I think sometimes on LinkedIn, I feel we get too formal to a point where it's not as authentic as it should be.
I'm seeing a trend, the radio show talking about online shopping and, all these other pieces outside of life. And, I like how you you embody bringing the work-life integration in a healthy way.
That's the only way to do it. I don't think, this segmentation of work life versus other life is healthy. If you're not at sync with what you do at work, I'm not saying it should overlap each other and, you should only think about work or you should only think about the tennis game you're going to have.
Mm.
But you should be able to think about both without feeling that you have to draw a line between the two. Because that line can also be a source of stress.
It can. And I think that for us is showing up authentically and wholly at work.
Correct.
So that you don't have to worry, who am I at home and who am I in the workplace?
Correct.
Who am I with my team? Do I have to be a different person, put on a persona?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the face, of course, you will treat different situations differently. That's fair. But the base of it, in the sense of your decision-making, your values, your beliefs should be same and should be visible in its true, authentic self.
I think this is a nice segue into some of the other maybe lighter or more fun questions that we have for the podcast. But before we get there, is there anything that, thinking back on what we've discussed today, is there anything that, is a lingering thought you just want to get it out of your mind? Anything we haven't maybe covered?
No, I think more generically, I started to form a view that in our context of the phase of workplace evolution that we are in, probably we are entering a phase of the biggest opportunity and challenge for HR professionals.
Why is that?
This is the time to really come to fore and drive, influence, shape the future of work. It's a need. It's happening. The shape of our workplace is changing. We've already seen that.
Greatly.
The shape of our workforce is changing. We are seeing that. How do we make an influence on what drives workplaces? What drives success? How do we deal with challenges? What are we doing to influence behaviors at workplace? What's the identity of our workplace? How is it shaping up? What are the factors influencing us? A lot of these questions are coming to fore today and will become a key player in defining how success gets measured going forward. And I think that's where HR as a function, as a profession, as a discipline really has a role to play.
I know we've spoken already a lot about the impact of COVID on the workplace, but it's also interesting to think how the role of HR changed, and I think maybe how people realized what a key function this is in, bringing the employee engagement, bringing the overall employee happiness to show up in that environment. But I think coming out of it, I resonate completely with what you're saying, especially because, let's not lie, I think we know the business environment is a little bit challenging these days. And what does that mean for the org? What does that mean for employees? And how do you retain that sort of trust and excitement when people come to work every day, knowing that, hey, we're all in this together?
Yeah. And it's not easy. There is no framework today that gives you guarantees. But
is empathy a framework?
Well, that way we'll end up with lots of frameworks, right? Yeah. So in some ways, maybe we have to challenge ourselves. Why do we need a framework?
I guess it boils down to what you said earlier, listening and the safe space to listen. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. We always like to wrap it up with a couple of, the fun questions. I think the first fun question in that sense is still something that's a little bit unconventional. So I'd love to hear your views on that. This is meant to be light. Let's not take ourselves too seriously. In HR, we always think that we are, meant to, once more put on that front. But I think this is, let's just keep it light. So yes or no, traditional HR is dying?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And let me qualify. It's not dying in the sense of there is no need for it. Okay. It's dying in the need of, we've now gotten tools and processes in place that traditional HR's value to the organization is, it's almost like, so let me take an example. We still go to a bank to, let's say, when did you last visit a bank?
I would have to think.
Correct,
2-3 years, maybe more.
Right. But that doesn't mean you don't have banking needs. It's just that tools at your disposal today do not need you to visit a branch.
I probably bank more often.
Correct. So same thing with traditional HR. Traditional HR has its value, but the tools have enabled it to happen more seamlessly in lots of different ways. And therefore, the focus has to now shift from traditional HR to the future of HR.
What would be some of the responsibilities that you would bucket under traditional HR?
More so, before HR came into play, this was personnel departments, industrial relations. So a lot of control functions, a lot of administrative tasks, a lot of focus on life cycle management, right, of employees. A lot of that has evolved over the years with, differing advents of technological interventions. That today, while it continues to be the bare minimum requirement, and you cannot do away with it, the ability to deliver this is a lot more evolved and a lot more seamless with technology. So HRs can focus their time and energy into other areas.
Such as?
Culture. Such as focus on employee as a whole, such as building transformation, helping the organization focus on how their strategy gets implemented, right? HR has a role to play in building business strategy.
100%.
Right.
Maybe not that we realize it enough, but...
And I think those are the spaces that are calling out for HR.
The concept of life cycle management that you mentioned earlier, I think anytime we want to manage something, we think about trying to control it or to influence it or to maybe keep it under control in that sense. But I think with everything we've been speaking about today, I have this sense that the future of HR that you're also talking about is about maybe appreciating the vibrance and the color that we have, the variety of employees that we work with. We have early birds, we have night owls, we have introverts, extroverts, all these different ways that people like to show up.
Right.
And how can we give room for everyone to breathe and to make their own choices in that sense. So
and make them feel aligned to a common goal.
While still feeling aligned to a common goal and working together to achieve that. So thank you. Next question. If you could start your career over, what would you do and why? And bartending does not count.
I don't know.
Now that I've taken away the best option.
I know. What else is left? If I started over, I would probably go back to hotels. I think, jokes aside, and I know you don't want me to go there, but that when I lived that career first time, it wasn't a very conscious choice. It was just the option I had at the time. But having lived that experience, I would make that choice more consciously now.
Beautifully put. You may have more calls after this. What secret talent do you have that most of your team doesn't know about?
Actually, they don't think I have any talent.
We all know about the drawing now. It's all over LinkedIn. So,
no, I don't think I have any talent for. And I'm not being...
I'm sure that's not true.
I'm not being frivolous about it. I think the only talent I have is I can work with people. And that has given me immense joy and satisfaction and achievements that I didn't do anything to achieve because I can work with people. And I believe that served me much better than what I could have expected.
Some might say it's a little bit helpful in this line of work.
Yeah, that's what I figured out.
We're glad that it figured out.
Well, I must also admit that it doesn't work all the time. I also am a big failure with certain situations. But, I don't aim to achieve 100% perfection either.
We all have a space to learn. Otherwise, why would we be alive? Okay, finally, what is one great book, movie, or podcast you would recommend?
Oh, I recently watched this movie. So my kids are in college, so we are not a young family. And we somehow decided, my kids are visiting home in holidays, both of them. I have 2 kids.
Great.
And we decided to go and watch this cartoon movie called Inside Out
2.
2. And I was wondering, why are we going and watching a cartoon movie? I mean, really,
Did you watch the first one?
I didn't.
All right.
And I was told by my kids that I have missed a big opportunity to watch the first one, and we will end up watching the first one now that I have watched the second one.
Okay.
And I fell in love with it. So if I have to recommend a movie of recent past from my experience, Inside Out 2.
You're the second person I know in an HR leadership role recommending Inside Out 2. So
I think this should be part of curriculum for HR. To be honest.
maybe curriculum for everyone. Why do you like Inside Out 2 so much?
I think it brings out in a very simple to understand manner how emotions play a role in what we do, and how we kind of need to not focus on curbing emotions that are uncomfortable, memories that we feel uncomfortable with, because those are the ones that also shape us, right? Feeling comfortable with all of me is more important than trying to shape myself in the areas that I feel comfortable with.
So maybe it's worth doing maybe a film screening here.
Oh, we used to do a movie day in past. I don't know if we'll do it this year again, but we'll book a hall and a whole staff with families get invited to go watch a movie together.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Just as a disclaimer, the podcast is not sponsored by Disney or Pixar. Thank you so much, Sanjeev. I think that brings us to the end of a very lovely conversation.
Thank you
so much. It was very, very enjoyable. Thank you for that special flair. I think you really, really showed up to today. I think even though, we all sat down almost empty-handed, I think it would turn out lovely. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of this episode. And I really, really hope that you got out of this as much as I did. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you, Sanjeev. Do like, share, comment, share with us your views. I think both Sanjeev and I are very active on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, we're happy to connect, happy to chat. So yes, please do stay connected and subscribe, like, and let's all stay connected for a better world of work.